Here at Brda Congress Center with us is Ms. Ivana Bartoletti. She's a privacy, security and digital ethics expert and an internationally recognized thought leader in the field of responsible technology. Author of An Artificial Revolution on Power, Politics and AI. She is a visiting policy fellow at the University of Oxford. Ms. Bartoletti was named Woman of the Year in 2019 in the Cyber Security Awards in recognition of her growing reputation as an advocate for equality, privacy and ethics at the heart of tech and AI. Facing the future is what she's going to talk about, the education, the literacy and 21st century skills. Ms. Bartoletti, please.
So thank you so much. First, it's a real pleasure to be here, and to be here in person, traveling after so long is absolutely exciting, and I'm really looking forward to more and more of this. As mentioned, my background is very much in privacy and digital ethics, and I'm also the co-founder of an organization called Women Leading in Artificial Intelligence, which is a global network of women trying to really push for ethics and privacy and responsibility at the heart of artificial intelligence. Now, when we talk about skills and literacy and competencies in artificial intelligence, I think the first thing that I would like to really quickly do is to set the scenes a little bit. Because one of the things I've seen mostly happen over the last few years, and I think the pandemic has also brought this a lot forward, is what is called techno-solutionism, which is that what often happens is that, oh yes, we're living in the age of AI, so all the focus has to be around technology. And technology is going to solve all the problems that we've got, and that has to be the same in the way that we respond from an educational standpoint. Well, I think this is something that we've got to challenge because most of the times the solutions to the big challenges and promises and fantastic promises that we've got ahead of us are not necessarily only technological, but they are policy and political. And therefore, it's really important that when we think about what skills and competencies do we need in the age of artificial intelligence, then we say, okay, what is the context that we're operating in, and what do we want to achieve as a society, and in this case is Europe. So to me, the context is very simple. The context is that people have less and less trust in technology. The context is that privacy is becoming very relevant for a lot of individuals. When individuals are given the choice on whether they want privacy or not, they are choosing privacy. If we want that, the key word that I've heard in here is trust. Trust. If we want AI, if we want to flourish with artificial intelligence and to create that trust, we need people to have trust in this technology. And to do so, we must recognize, and then I'll come to the skills in a second, we must recognize that privacy is an absolute element of this. The other thing that on top of the changing public attitudes is related to the trends of datification and surveillance that we've seen happening over the last few years. And these have skyrocketed over the last decade, over the last few years, 2 years in particular, but it's really important because also that has been undermining some of the trust that individuals have in these systems. Then the other thing that we are seeing happening at the moment is that data, and we've talked a lot about data in recent times, is very much becoming a political issue, a political area to deal with, and is very much related to the concept of sovereignty that we are talking so much about. In a context, however, on a globally interdependent world, where technology and independent on the global supply chain, I mean, we just need to look, for example, at the issue of microchips to understand how completely interdependent we all are across the world. So why did I say this? Because this is the context we are operating in. And when we look at the skills and competencies that we need for artificial intelligence, they're not just technological. They relate to, yes, the coding, the creating the new systems, but they also very much relate to what products we are going to create, how are we going to implement these technologies, how are companies going to adopt new technologies, and also we are looking at how is this going to impact the workforce, and how are we teaching individuals to work with these machines. So the context for me is very crucial. And the other very important thing is the objective. Again, sometimes we are experiencing a rush to technology. Sometimes we are experiencing the glamour of a new product just because it looks cool. But the reality is that what I would like to see much more is a little bit more of a strategic approach and say, what problems are we trying to solve here? And strategically, as countries, what is that we are trying to solve? Where are we going to use artificial intelligence to make us more competitive, to make us more leaner in the processes that we have? So the strategic element of it is, again, one that requires training, skills, and education. Ultimately, the objective should be prosperity, should be well-being, and also resilience in a very interdependent supply chain. How does that translate in education? Well, I think there are different elements to this. First one is to understand that we have to teach since a very early age, in my view, what is the cooperation with machine going to look like? It's not just about bringing technology or creating technology, but how are we going to live with that technology? What is going to happen to the human knowledge? But also in particular, when there are studies around cooperation with machines, they show that individuals automatically tend to trust the results of the machines. But actually, over the last few years, we've seen that some machines do replicate, amplify the stereotypes that we're seeing in society, and this is something that needs challenging. Of course, the ability to understand a machine depends on the context, depends on who is using it, but it's really important to understand and even investigate further what is the relationship between the human and the machine. Because not understanding the machine can lead to wrong decisions for businesses, on top of unethical ones, because they're rooted in bias and in data sets that have not been checked properly. The other element is, if we want to really invest in these technologies, we've got to invest in the context that I talked about before. And one element is privacy. I would like to see Europe, which has been leading on, for example, the General Data Protection Regulation, and with the European AI Act, and with the Digital Markets and Digital Services Act. I would like to see Europe investing in privacy-enhancing technologies, creating spaces so the citizens feel that their data can be used in a way which is respectful of privacy through, for example, technologies that remain very expensive and only accessible to the large corporations. And I'm talking about sophisticated encryption, as well as differential privacy or other similar technologies. If we were able to say we're training the next generation of leaders in this space, it can combine privacy, embrace the change in public attitudes so that people can actually trust these technologies. I think that would be really, really important. The other thing that we need to do is we need to bridge the gap between legal and technical. I've been in this field for a long time in the privacy legislation. And I have to say that too often, people from different backgrounds do not talk to each other. And this is really important, because when it comes to artificial intelligence, companies need to be able to navigate the complexity from a regulatory standpoint. And this requires lawyers to be able to understand the technology. This requires privacy to move not away, but from the law and step into the technology. It requires people to understand algorithms in order to for example, identify the right controls that need to be put around them. And also identify people, helps organizations to really find that common understanding on the products that they are developing and using. And if we look at the European AI Act, and the plethora, for example, of controls and checks around high-risk artificial intelligence systems, those controls require skills and the ability to audit an algorithm, which is a really important thing in some particular context, requires skills and the ability to do so. but particularly it's really important, in my view, to understand that if we want to push in the context of regulation, which is, I think it helps in the sense that creates the level of legal certainty that companies need, I really believe that that new capacity, the ability to bring professions and different backgrounds together is really important. So we need to think about moving away from a silo culture in our education systems, where the lawyers do not interact with the scientists, where we see the education still very much divided and we do not have that cooperation. The last thing that I wanted to mention in this is around diversity, because this is really, really important and very dear to my heart. We've seen over recent years that artificial intelligence is able to increase, perpetuate, code and hardwire the stereotypes that we have in society right now. And this is bad. And it's bad not just because bias is unethical, but also because for companies, bias can lead to wrong business decisions and ultimately in financial losses. So it's really, really important to understand that all the trust that we have in data is really important. But data cannot be considered a neutral thing. Data is the mirror of society as it is now in 2021, and therefore represents years and years of the inequalities that we are here and we would like to get rid of in the first place. So we do need to train people who understand this, who are able to make sure that we prepare and that we have the right controls in place, the right testing situations in place, and we are able to really create systems that do not procrastinate, exasperate, and codify. And when it comes to predictive technologies in particular, that do not create self-fulfilling prophecies by simply bringing the past into the future. This requires a skill on top of the will to do so. And of course, the regulation, because sometimes having to do all this and to embrace all these checks and controls could mean that for a company is a bit of a financial loss. And this is why it's really important to have the checks. And within this, and I'm closing, having people from every background working in artificial intelligence is really, really important. And I'm not just talking about women, I'm talking from everybody coming from different backgrounds. Our societies are increasingly multicultural, and everybody has to have a stake into this. And again, this is because of the idea of prosperity and technology and benefiting everyone. And in particular, this is because having a diverse workforce and having better AI means an AI that people can trust. And without trust, as we said many times, then growth is not really possible. Thank you.
Ms. Ivana Bartoletti, thank you very much.